Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 71. Chapter 71. Pierre had of late rarely seen his wife alone. Both in Petersburg and in Moscow, their house was always full of visitors. The night after the duel, he did not go to his bedroom, but as he often did, remained in his father's room, that huge room in which Count Bezúkhov had died. He lay down on the sofa, meaning to fall asleep and forget all that had happened to him, but could not do so. Such a storm of feelings, thoughts, and memories suddenly arose within him that he could not fall asleep, nor even remain in one place, but had to jump up and pace the room with rapid steps. Now he seemed to see her in the early days of their marriage, with bare shoulders and a languid, passionate look on her face. And then immediately he saw beside her Dólokhov's handsome, insolent, hard, and mocking face, as he had seen it at the banquet. And then that same face, pale, quivering, and suffering, as it had been when he reeled and sank onto the snow. What has happened? He asked himself. I have killed her lover, yes, killed my wife's lover. Yes, that was it. And why? How did I come to do it? Because you married her, answered an inner voice. But in what was I to blame? He asked. In marrying her without loving her, and deceiving yourself in her. And he vividly recalled that moment after supper at Prince Vasíli's when he spoke those words which he had found so difficult to utter. I love you. It all comes from that. Even then I felt it, he thought. I felt then that it was not so, that I had no right to do it. And so it turns out. He remembered his honeymoon and blushed at the recollection. Particularly vivid, humiliating, and shameful was the recollection of how one day, soon after his marriage, he came out of the bedroom into his study, a little before noon, in his silk dressing gown, and found his head steward there, who, bowing respectfully, looked into his face and at his dressing gown, and then smiled slightly, as if expressing respectful understanding of his employer's happiness. But how often I have felt proud of her majestic beauty and social tact, thought he. Been proud of my house, in which she received all Petersburg, proud of her unapproachability and beauty. So this is what I was proud of. I then thought, and I did not understand her. How often when considering her character I have told myself that I was to blame for not understanding her, for not understanding that constant composure and complacency, and lack of all interest or desires, and the whole secret lies in the terrible truth that she is a depraved woman. Now I have spoken that terrible word to myself, all has become clear. Anatoly used to come to borrow money from her and used to kiss her naked shoulders. She did not give him the money, but let herself be kissed. Her father, in jest, tried to rouse her jealousy. She replied with a calm smile that she was not so stupid as to be jealous. Let him do what he pleases, she used to say of me. One day I asked her if she felt any symptoms of pregnancy. She laughed contemptuously and said she was not so much of a fool to want to get children, and that she was not going to have any with me anyway. Then he recalled the coarseness and bluntness of her thoughts, and the vulgarity of her expressions that were so natural to her, though she had been brought up in the most aristocratic of circles. I'm not such a fool. Just you try it on. Allez-vous promener, she used to say. Often seeing the success she had with young and old men and women, Pierre could not understand why he did not love her. Yes, I never loved her, said he to himself. I knew she was a depraved woman, he repeated, but dared not admit it to myself. Now there's Dólokhov sitting in the snow with a forced smile and perhaps dying, while meeting my remorse with some forced bravado. Pierre was one of those people who, in spite of an appearance of what is called weak character, do not seek a confidant in their troubles. He digested his sufferings alone. It is all her fault, he said to himself. But what of that? Why do I bind myself to her? Why did I say je vous aime to her? Which was a lie, and worse than a lie. I am guilty and must endure. Endure what? A slur on my name? A misfortune for life? That's nonsense, he thought. The slur on my name and honor, that's all apart from myself. Louis XVI was executed because they said he was dishonorable and a criminal, came into Pierre's head. And from their point of view, they were right, as were those two who canonized him and died a martyr's death for his sake. Then Robespierre was beheaded for being a despot. Who was right and who was wrong? No one. But if you are alive, live. Tomorrow you'll die, as I might have died an hour ago. And is it worth tormenting myself when one has only a moment of life in comparison with all eternity? But at the moment when he imagined himself calmed by such reflections, she suddenly came into his mind, as she was at the moments when he had most strongly expressed his insincere love for her, and he felt the blood rush to his heart, and had to get up and move about and break and tear whatever came into his hand. Why did I tell her je vous aime? He kept repeating to himself. In the night he called his valet and told him to pack up and go to Petersburg. He could not imagine how he could speak to her now. He resolved to go away next day, and to leave a letter informing her of his intention to part from her forever. Next morning, when the valet came into the room with his coffee, Pierre was lying asleep on the ottoman with an open book in his hand. He woke up and looked around for a while with a startled expression, unable to realize where he was. "The Countess told me to inquire whether your Excellency was at home," said the valet. But before Pierre could decide what answer he would send, the Countess herself, in a white satin dressing gown, embroidered with silver and with simply dressed hair, 2 immense plaits twice round her lovely head like a coronet, entered the room, calm and majestic, except that there was a wrathful wrinkle on her rather prominent marble brow. With her imperturbable calm, she did not begin to speak in front of the valet. She knew of the duel, and had come to speak of it. She waited till the valet had set down the coffee things and left the room. Pierre looked at her timidly over his spectacles, and like a hare surrounded by hounds who lays back her ears and continues to crouch motionless before her enemies, he tried to continue reading, but felt this to be senseless and impossible. He again glanced timidly at her. She did not sit down, but looked down at him with a contemptuous smile, waiting for the valet to go. "Well, what's this now? What have you been up to now? I should like to know," she asked sternly. "I? What have I?" stammered Pierre. "So it seems you're a hero, huh? Come now. What was this duel about? What is it meant to prove? What? I ask you." Pierre turned over heavily on the ottoman and opened his mouth, but could not reply. "If you won't answer, I'll tell you," Helene went on. "You believe everything you're told. You were told," Helene laughed, "that Dólokhov was my lover." She said in French, with her coarse plainness of speech, uttering the word amant, as casually as any other word. "And you believed it. Well, what have you proved? What does this duel prove? That you're a fool, que vous êtes un sot." But everybody knew that. What will be the result? That I shall be the laughingstock of all Moscow? That everyone say that you, drunk and not knowing what you were about, challenged a man you were jealous of without cause? Helene raised her voice and became more and more excited. "A man who is a better man than you in every way?" Growled Pierre, frowning without looking at her and not moving a muscle. "And how could you believe he was my lover? Why, because I like his company? If you were cleverer and more agreeable, I should prefer yours." "Don't speak to me, I beg you," muttered Pierre hoarsely. "Why shouldn't I speak? I can speak as I like, and I tell you plainly that there are not many wives with husbands such as you who would not have taken lovers, des amants. But I have not done so," said she. Pierre wished to say something, looked at her with eyes whose strange expression she did not understand, and lay down again. He was suffering physically at that moment. There was a weight on his chest, and he could not breathe. He knew that he must do something to put an end to this suffering, but what he wanted to do was too terrible. "We had better separate," he muttered in a broken voice. "Separate? Very well, but only if you give me a fortune," said Helene. "Separate? That's a thing to frighten me with." Pierre leaped up from the sofa and rushed staggeringly toward her. "I'll kill you!" he shouted, and seizing the marble top of a table with a strength he had never before felt, he made a step towards her, brandishing the slab. Helene's face became terrible. She shrieked and sprang aside. His father's nature showed itself in Pierre. He felt the fascination and delight of frenzy. He flung down the slab, broke it, and swooping down on her with outstretched hands, shouted, "Get out!" in such a terrible voice that the whole house heard it with horror. God knows what he would have done at that moment had Helene not fled from the room. A week later, Pierre gave his wife full power to control all his estates in Great Russia, which formed the larger part of his property, and left for Petersburg alone. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 72. Hope you liked it. I'll now go to my reflection on the same. I'm sorry, that's my reading of chapter 71. Here's my reflection. A Year of War and Peace, Day 71. Self-Judgment and the Wild Spectrum of Love. Je vous envie. With these 3 words, uttered back at Prince Vasily's during Helene's name day party, Pierre Bezukhov joined himself to a doomed love affair. Funny, the wild spectrum of love. Dante Alighieri described his beloved Beatrice as so winsome and so worthy, tanto gentile e tanto onesta, that just by walking on the earth she showed what miracles can be. The only miracle of Pierre and Helene's relationship is that so far Pierre has only attempted to murder 1 person. Pierre has problems, man. Actually, he seems to have inverted Hova's hierarchy of predicaments and got himself into just one big problem, that problem being, of course, Helene. So after putting one in Dolokhov, Pierre returns home to interrogate his problem. It's tough going. His mind is a storm of feelings and thoughts. He can't help but think back on the 3 words that start today's entry, and how, provoked by Helene's lusty beauty and pressured by her fathers to accept her hand in marriage, he proved Proust's dictum that it is always thus, impelled by a state of mind which is destined not to last, that we make our irrevocable decisions. After what seems like an eternity of thinking about his problem, Pierre comes to the conclusion that Helene is a depraved woman, that he made a mistake in marrying her, and that he must leave her immediately. After all, he reasons, if you are alive, live. Tomorrow you may die, as I might have died an hour ago. And is it worth tormenting oneself, when one has only a moment of life in comparison with all eternity? Fair enough, but this calm resolve is disturbed when Helene herself comes calling. She's got a lot to say. Her words are telling, for if it's true, as Clarissa Harlow tells us, that words are the body and dress of thought, then Helene's mind is Mugatu's derelict fashion line, complete garbage. She taunts Pierre with coarse language about lovers. She ridicules his social standing. And when Pierre tells her that he intends on leaving her, she informs him that the only way that will happen will be if he leaves her with a settlement. This demand launches Pierre into a murderous frenzy. He throws a marble tabletop across the room. He screams at her in a voice that horrifies everyone in the house. He lunges at her. Then a week later, he gives her power over his estates and leaves for Petersburg. It may not seem like it, but Pierre is finally taking some prudent steps towards self-improvement. This is the first time, after all, that we've seen him sit down with himself and really think. Further, his thinking is one of self-reflection. He's judging himself. This is a step in the right direction. Daily meditation. It was the custom of Sextius, when the day was over, and he had betaken himself to rest, to inquire of his spirit. What bad habit of yours have you cured today? What vice have you checked? In what respect are you better? Anger will cease and become more gentle, if it knows that every day it will have to appear before the judgment seat. What can be more admirable than this fashion of discussing the whole of the day's events? How sweet is the sleep which follows this self-examination! How calm, how sound, and careless it is when our spirit has either received praise or reprimand, and when our secret inquisitor and censor has made his report about our morals. Seneca on anger. All right, that's it for chapter 71. I hope you join me. Thanks so much for listening today. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are below. Your support is greatly appreciated. Tomorrow we will be reading and reflecting on chapter 72. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and of others.